Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever Southeast Asian Mental Health Initiative Student Symposium, in which we are going to be showcasing the work of emerging scholars from different countries in Southeast Asia. And we have different presenters here today from Vietnam and also from Cambodia, who will be sharing with us their work about mental health. And this is part of a larger Southeast Asian mental health initiative, which we started about a year ago, actually. So it's been a little time, and we had our first virtual conference in September of 2022, and we are planning for our second conference, which will be held face-to-face in Southeast Asia in the future. And in the meantime, we have a number of other projects going on. And one of these projects are these regular symposia that we hold. And usually in the symposia, we've had established professors and scholars share a bit about their work. And as I mentioned, this is the first time we are actually going to have students presenting. So I'm very excited for that. And our first presenter is going to be Pham Nguyen Dan Thom. She majors in psychology and minors in social studies at Fulbright University, Vietnam. From a young age, her encounters with gender-based prejudice ignited a profound passion and determination to delve into the study of sexism and gender inequality, specifically within organizational contexts. And she will be presenting about Vietnamese women's experience of ambivalent sexism in the STEM workplace. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear about your work. And also, I was just going to say, if you have questions, just note them down, and then we're going to take all the questions after everyone has presented.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you, Anna, for organizing the symposium. So I will present my thesis. So before jumping into the presentation, I also want to introduce myself again. So my name is Thom, and I just officially graduated from Fulbright University 3 days ago. And I'm very excited to present to you my research thesis today. So I will share my screen. Oh,
Are you able to share your screen?
yes.
Okay.
Just give me a second to arrange it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Yes. So this is my research thesis at Fulbright about a topic that is very close to my heart, which is sexism in the workplace. So workplace sexism can be defined as attitudes and actions that discriminate against people merely because of their gender in the organizational context. The title of the thesis come from one participant sharing about her experiences with sexism. So when she first switched her career to become a software engineer, a seminar organizer told her that at your age, you should care more about marriage and children because you can never advance as a software developer. And she also shared that there were many times when she answered questions about technology on the internet, other questioned her back, like, why can a girl be so sure about this? So these anecdotes are an example of the fact that in Vietnam, despite a high rate of women participation in the workforce, women, especially those working in STEM, still encounter pervasive sexist prejudice and discrimination. Research showed that despite the equivalent working hours with men, female workers have lower quality employment, lower wages, and lower representation in decision-making positions in Vietnam. women also face gender prejudice as the inferior income earners, less capable leaders, and have to deal with double standards of working, succeeding both at work and at home. And it's also more alarming that the pandemic worsened the gender inequalities in the Vietnamese labor market as more women left their job than men during the pandemic. Therefore, it is very urgent and critical to increase the scholarly attentions on Vietnamese women experiences with sexism to improve the working experiences, engagement, and representation in the workplace. One theoretical framework capturing the multidimensional sexist belief and attitude directed at women is the ambivalent sexism theory, developed by Glick and Fisk. This theory proposed that sexism is essentially ambivalent because it's comprised two forms, hostile and benevolent. On the one hand, hostile sexism include derogatory and competitive attitude towards women as incompetent, inferior, and attempting to control men through their sexuality or feminist movement. On the other hand, benevolent sexism involves subjectively benevolent yet patronizing attitude that women are weak, delicate, virtuous, and in need of man protection and adoration. And also the belief that they are only suited and best suited to performing traditional gender role, such as mother and wife, and also the belief that the love and affection make a man feel complete. Benevolent sexism can sound very affirmative and positive in a sense, but it also implicitly sexist because it underlies the justifications for men ownership of women, restriction upon women in the traditional domains, and romanticization of women as sexual objects. Glick and Fick indicate that despite the different balance, hostile and benevolent sexism play complementary part in justifying and perpetuating the man's superiority in their relationships and in structural power. Hostile sexism and benevolent sexism consist of three types for each. The first type is paternalism. So hostile sexism has dominated paternalism, which is the belief that women contest men's power and should be controlled by men. The benevolent counterpart is protective paternalism, which is the belief that women witness require men to become protectors and providers for them. The second type is gender differentiation. We have competitive gender differentiation, which is the belief about women negative stereotype, such as the incompetence in leadership positions. And we have complementary gender differentiation, which assign women with positive stereotype about their competency for domestic role only, and also create complementary stereotypical trait of men and women. For example, women are emotional and men are rational. We have the third type, which is gender differentiation. So the hostile sexism will have heterosexual hostility, which is the belief about women's use of sexual expression to control men. And the benevolent counterpart is heterosexual intimacy, which idealize women heterosexual romantic relationships as very essential to complete men. About research about ambivalent sexism in STEM workplace, primary research has shown that ambivalent sexism in STEM workplace can have serious impact on women's career and well-being. So one experiment in which biology, chemistry, and physics professor rate male and female lab manager applicants show that female applicants are often evaluated to have lower competence and receive a lower starting salary and less mentorship than the male applicants during the hiring process. Another study showed that women working in STEM receive fewer assignment of important tasks because of their benevolent belief that women should be protected and therefore will move from the difficult task. This patronizing attitude and behaviors take away women opportunities to develop new skills and advance into promotion, and which may be the reason behind the underrepresentation in organization leadership. Ambivalent sexism is also found to increase mental health problems, decrease self-esteem, and increase women's self-doubt. Despite the prevalent issues of sexism found in STEM women globally, in Vietnam at this stage, little research has been conducted on the sexist experiences of a specific population of women working in STEM. And moreover, few studies had examined the association between sexism and women's mental health. Therefore, given the background of sexism research, my study aims to investigate the following research question and hypothesis. The first research question is about how frequently do women experience hostile and violent sexism in their STEM workplace. The hypothesis is women encounter more benevolent sexism than hostile sexism. The second research question is about to what degree do they perceive sexist experiences as stressful, and to what degree do they perceive sexist experiences as sexist? The corresponding hypothesis is women perceive benevolent sexism to be less stressful and less sexist than hostile sexism. And the third research question, which is also the most important one, is how do these experiences relate and impact their well-being? The hypothesis is there is a positive relationship between experiences with sexism and mental health issues among women. About the methodology, I will talk first about the participants. So the study employed an online self-reported survey to collect data. The final sample size is 148 women. They range in age from 18 to 49 years old. And on average, they had worked for 5.5 years in STEM fields. About the measures, for the sake of time, I will only focus on the key measure, which is the short 20-item version of the experiences with ambivalent sexism inventory developed by Solomon et al. in 2020. Based on their sexism theory, these scales try to measure women's frequency of exposure to hostile sexism and benevolent sexism. My study will administer 4 out of 5 subscale of the EASI, including hostile sexism, HS, heterosexual hostility, HH, protective paternalism, PP, and complementary gender differentiation, CGD. The first two belong to hostile sexism, and the last two belong to benevolent sexism. And now we will come to the more exciting part, the result and discussion part. So I will also try to present to you according to the 3 main research questions. The first one is the result of the frequency. To examine how frequently women experience sexism, I conducted a fragment test to compare the frequency of 4 types of sexism. And the test revealed a significant differences in the frequency of these types. Women reported experiencing PP more frequently, followed by CGD and HS, and HS to be the least frequently experiences. This is and based on the EASI scale scoring, the average of frequency of PP is around 2 to 1 incidents per month. The average frequency of CGD is around less than 1 incident per month, and the average frequency of HS is around no incident during the past 12 months to less than 1 incident per month, and the average of HS corresponded to almost no incidents during the past 12 months. The follow-up post-hoc test also confirmed the significant pairwise difference. And so this result showed that women experience more benevolent sexism than hostile sexism at their STEM workplace. The second question is about how stressful and sexist women perceive their experiences. And so all the experiences were rated to be almost not stressful to slightly stressful to them. And I also conducted a repeated measure ANOVA to examine the differences in women rating. And this analysis revealed that there is no significant mean effect, which suggested that women perceive all four experiences to elicit the same level of stress. And this is opposite to my hypothesis that participants would perceive hostile sexism to be more stressful than benevolent ones. And women also perceive these experiences to be almost not sexist to slightly sexist. When I conducted a repeated measure ANOVA, there is a significant mean effect, indicating that there is a significant difference among the rating of the experiences. However, the follow-up pairwise comparison revealed that there was only a significant differences in the sexism rating between HH and PP experiences, but no other significant pairwise differences. So this partly aligns with my hypothesis that hostile sexism is perceived to be more sexist than benevolent ones. Meanwhile, the undetected differences in the post-hoc test may be due to the small sample size for the pairwise comparison. So the last question is to see if the frequency of experience with sexism is related to the mental health issues. So firstly, I conducted the correlation analysis, and the analysis found that frequency of HH, HHPP, and CGD all positively correlated with mental health problems. I also conducted multiple linear regression and using frequency of HS, PP, and CGD as the predictors and mental health problems as the outcomes. So for this analysis, I excluded the frequency of HH because of the non-normal distribution. And the regression model was found to be significant with the frequency of HS experiences as a positive predictors of mental health problems. Meanwhile, the frequency of CGD and PP were not significant predictors. So let's go to the discussion in which I will go into more details about interpreting the findings and comparing with the past research. My study found that women working in STEM reported experiencing more benevolent sexism, which is the protective paternalism and complementary gender differentiation, and then hostile sexism at the workplace. This finding is consistent with the past research on samples of US women who also indicated a greater exposure to benevolent sexism over hostile sexism. It should be noted that in my study, women reported experiencing protective paternalism more frequently. And this aligns with the past research that in male-dominated organizations, women are likely to be protected by the male college, especially from mission-critical opportunities. These behaviors can be attributed to the protective paternalism belief that women should be protected for being weaker than men and for being less competent than men to do challenging tasks. It is concerning because the past research also show that such protective patterns can deprive women of high visibility and high value developmental opportunities at the workplace, and which reduce their chances for promotion and leadership. The next finding is, despite its high prevalence in the workplace, women in this study did not perceive benevolent sexism as sexist. This result is not surprising because the research also discovered women's tendency to view benevolent sexism as totally acceptable, harmless, and less overtly sexist compared with hostile sexism. So why might this be the case? I think there can be two explanations for this. The first one draw from ambivalent sexism theory. The theory think that women normalization of benevolent sexism may derive from their interpretation of the sexism as protection and benefit for them. For example, like preferential treatment and favorable stereotype about them as warm and sweet. The second reason comes from the cultural perspective. So Vietnamese female employee Lenin perception of benevolent sexism can stem from their socialization of gender cultural norms in Vietnamese society. So in Vietnam, gender expectations are rooted in Confucian moral teachings about woman's obedience, meaning the subordination and obedience to men, and also for virtues, meaning women's duty to maintain high morality in their work, appearance, behavior, and speech. The teaching somewhat align with benevolent sexist ideologies about women as the weaker with the more virtuous sex. Such influence on gender relations in Vietnam can lead women to internalize female inferiority and to accept men dominant power in the workplace. And therefore, given the benevolent sexist behaviors are socially accepted and seemingly likable, women may not be aware of them as sexism. The current study also show positive association between the frequency of forced sexist experiences and mental health problems, and also found that hostile sexism was a predictor of mental health problems. So these findings are also in line with the prior research, revealing that the more sexist experiences women encounter, the more mental health problems they are likely to experience. But it should also be noted that in my study, I use correlation analysis, and correlation analysis does not establish a causal relationship between sexism and psychological health. And also, my research design is quite simple. It has a few variables. So it should be noted that it is not possible in my research to conclude as to whether women greater frequency of encountering sexism is the single cause of mental health problems, and whether the frequency causes the mental health problems or the other way around. But overall, these findings have so far supported and give some recommendations about the link between frequency of exposure to hostile sexism and benevolent sexism and mental health problems. And this result indicate that the impact of hostile sexism is particularly damaging to mental health, and future research, especially longitudinal and experimental designs, can take a look at this kind of relationship and examine the causal and nuanced relationship between benevolent sexism, hostile sexism, and mental health. About the implication, my research has theoretical implication because it empirically support the ambivalent sexism theory claim about the cross-cultural pervasiveness of hostile and benevolent sexism. And because it's found that women working in STEM do not perceive sexism as a benevolent sexism as sexist and stressful. It also support the claim that the nature of benevolent sexism do not fit the standard notion of prejudice. And about the practical implications, my research set light on the impact of sexism on well-being, and also give recommendation and evidence for STEM organization and policymakers to focus more on women experiences, improve women working environments and experiences to be more inclusive, and give more attention to how to improve and protect women well-being in STEM organization. And about the limitation and future directions, some of my limitations are because the methodology is online survey. So the sample size may be limited to the online active groups only. And because the EASI scale is very new, there may be some challenges in conceptual and translational equivalence from English to Vietnamese. And as I also mentioned, because my research use the correlation analysis and the research design is quite simple, the findings may not conclude and give in-depth detail about whether frequency of experiences with sexism is a single cause of mental health, or there are any other mediating factors in this relationship. So I suggest that future research can consider qualitative method, for example, interview and focus group, to explore fully the complexity and nuances of ambivalent sexism and its manifestations among Vietnamese women. And future research can also consider experimental and longitudinal designs to investigate a clearer and stronger cause-effect relationship between these variables, and to explore whether there are any other possible mediating factors involved in this relationship. And that is all I want to present for my research thesis today. And thank you for your attentive listening. And I look forward to discuss more and respond to your questions in the Q&A section.
Thank you so much for that very interesting presentation. I know I have several questions and I'll hold off on asking them until everyone has gone, but it's always very interesting for me to hear more about what sort of gender ideals are in different cultural contexts, and then also how that impacts different kinds of social spaces and interactions. So our next speaker was going to be Sinat Or, but unfortunately she can't join us due to a family emergency. So instead, we're going to move on to our third speaker, Lê Đăng Quang. And he is a student also at Fulbright University in Vietnam. His capstone thesis studies the lived experiences of loneliness among young Vietnamese adults. It views loneliness as a subjective and complex experience. The study adds a locally specific account of the experience of loneliness that is studied through qualitative research methods into the existing literature in Vietnam. And his future plan is to navigate the professional opportunities for psychology in Vietnam, especially in educational institutions and in academia. And he will be presenting about experiences of loneliness among young Vietnamese adults.
Thank you, Dr. Leslie, for the introduction. Let me share the screen. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Đăng Quang, and I'm from Fulbright University, Vietnam, the same cohort with Đăng Tâm, our first presenter. And it's my honor to present my capstone here in the summer symposium. And its title is it's an inevitable part of growing up, and an exploratory study into the experience of loneliness among young Vietnamese adults. So in today's presentation, due to time constraint, I would go through the very key information across 5 sections. Why did I choose this topic? What had been done and what had not been done in Vietnam and all over the world about loneliness. And how did I study it? The methodology of my research, what did I find, and what next? So a little bit about the background to this study. I actually want to tell you about the personal motivation first. Like last year summer, when I was struggling with finding out a topic for my capstone thesis at Fulbright for the psychology major, I actually accidentally had a lot of conversation with my college friends about how their college life had been like going on and their experiences of loneliness as well. And like contradictory to my expectation, like their loneliness like was not all about like being isolated and like having only a few friends, but like I was also taken aback because they tell me about how a loss of purposes or directions in life and like uh, uh, a loss meanings in life also like contribute to their experience of loneliness. And I like started asking questions about loneliness and what it was. And I did further studies into loneliness and find that firstly, the harmful impacts of it on well-being. So in many ASEAN countries, loneliness is highly associated with various health risks like suicidal ideation and anxiety, drug use and alcohol use, violence, and even underage sex, according to a research in 2017. And it is also very prevalent, especially among young adults. Like in a BBC, the biggest like loneliness experiment among 55,000 participants all over the world, 1/3 of them like reported that they often and very often feel lonely. And among the young adults, 40% of them reported feeling lonely often and very often, which make them the most vulnerable group to loneliness. However, I also find that loneliness is not a statistical report or like the causes of so many health risks, but above all, loneliness is also a very diverse lived experience. And why it like arises and affects people of all age, genders, and like from every socioeconomic background, it is not a homogeneous experience at all. And like with all this going on, I started out and then refined my research question into what is the lived experience of loneliness among young adults in Vietnam. Actually, like the existing research on loneliness in Vietnam is emerging, but it remains scarce. And it focuses primarily on prevalent causes and the negative experience of loneliness on different age group, physical and mental health. And I listed out 3 like landmark papers that I can find in Vietnam. And they study like, for example, the links between loneliness and university students' sense of esteem and locus of control, or how like people from different demographics would how like different demographics variables would affect loneliness like differently, or how nomophobia or the fear of having a shut screen or fear of missing out are like indicative of loneliness. But like all these studies share the same thing, like they are all like quantitative studies, and they adopt a quite uniform definition of loneliness. But like through the talks between me and my friends, I find that loneliness is more than just statistical reports and the like. And I find that's where I find the gap of loneliness literature in Vietnam. And the existing loneliness literature in Vietnam provides quite little insight into understanding the experience as subjectively felt, perceived, and described by young adults. And the reliance on predefined understanding and construction of loneliness might risk overlooking the complexity of loneliness as a subjective experience. And that is why I chose this topic as for my capstone thesis. And which leads to my methodological design. I use qualitative research method, mostly semi-structured interview to collect data, and then I analyze data using semantic thematic analysis. And the philosophical basis of my research is realism. So basically what it means is that like the realism ontology and epistemology stipulates that there is a single reality which can be accessed through what is shared by the participants. I choose this philosophical anchor because loneliness in Vietnam is not quite well established, well researched using qualitative studies. So it would be a very challenging task for me to interpret further the experience of my participants, or to put it into the context of Vietnamese economic development or social cultural background. So due to the scope of this study, I choose realism as my philosophy, which is also a limitation of my research. But yeah. And for the participants, I talked to 8 young adults aged 21 to 24. I find that a single interview with them would not be enough for me for them to tell me about their experiences and the notion of loneliness. So there would be 2 interviews for each participants, and all of them are living and studying in Ho Chi Minh City, and I recruited them through convenience sampling. And here's my thematic mapping of the backbone of my findings. I have 4 themes. The overarching theme 1 focuses on some of the key conceptualizations that my participants used in order to describe their experience with loneliness, including connectedness, solitude, and loneliness, and the relationship between all these conceptualizations. And I will talk about it later. The second theme focuses on the causes of loneliness, which is disconnectedness from some other people, or the self and the surrounding, and I will talk about it later too. But disconnectedness itself is not loneliness, but loneliness includes the emotional aspect to it. So that would be addressed in the overarching theme 3. And then the 4th theme basically shows that the experience of loneliness is not static, but participants also compromise with themselves, with others, and also use reflection and contemplation to either make meanings out of their experience, or to have lessons learned for them for future encounters with loneliness. So about the first finding, participants distinguish very clearly between loneliness and solitude through connectedness. So there are some key keywords here. For example, the connectedness. Most of my participants turn to connectedness to describe the experience. So while connection denotes the existence of a tangible social link between individuals, connectedness connotes the qualitative aspect of that link. For example, I have a quote here from my participant to show it. When you are connected with someone, no matter where you go and what you do, their deep understanding about you remains unchanged. Meeting up or not does not destroy the connectedness. It is solid, very solid. And the second key concept is solitude, which is a desirable experience of being alone, where participants doesn't feel disconnected from others. So they recapitulate the experience of solitude as like being alone in the presence of others, which I find quite intriguing. And loneliness is experienced when participants feel a sense of disconnectedness, whether or not they are alone. And they recapitulate this experience using like the phrase like being alone in the presence of others. So the relationship between being alone, solitude, and loneliness can be summarized in the figure as you can see here, except that participants can feel lonely when they feel disconnectedness, whether or not they are alone. Many participants reported feeling lonely even when they are surrounded by so many people. So that is the first finding. The second findings that I want to present is disconnectedness as the cause of loneliness. So the first disconnectedness is from other people. Like most of the participants focus on families and friends as the social circle from of their disconnectedness. So for example, when participants feel that their expectations cannot fulfilled by their family or friends, they would end up feeling disconnected. For example, some participants have the feelings to be with their families and their friends, or to confide in them about their own story or their own hardship. But then their family and their friends might be available sometimes, and that unavailability is somehow automatically equated with the loss of conditional love for the participants, or make the participant feel that they are being the burden to their families and their friends. Also, lost sense of belongings is reported as the primary cause of disconnectedness from others as well. And also, disconnectedness not only happens with other people, but also from the self and the surrounding. And this is quite existential here. A distorted sense of self, lost purposes and direction in life, and detachment from the broader surroundings reality result in disconnected with the self and the surrounding. Like some participants reported being all in for their personal project or their any academic projects, or but then the result doesn't turn out to be good for them, and they perceive it as the failure. And so at that point they feel quite adrift, lost directionality, and also they feel that they are also the failure too. And it gives them, costs them this feeling of disconnected from the self, and then which ends up making them feel lonely. For example, there's a quote here: "I lost my purpose, and losing purpose means I couldn't find happiness. I still read, but reading didn't spark joy as it used to. I lie in bed all day as I didn't want to wake up. I feared facing myself, no happiness, no purpose, and I felt like a total failure." And this participant is trying to tell me about how they experience loneliness from a disconnectedness with themselves. However, as I said before, disconnectedness itself is not the loneliness, but it's more like the thinking process, the sense-making process of loneliness among participants. And participants also reported the emotional aspects of loneliness as a part of the experience, of their lived experience, which is the key finding, the third key finding. So I will read this quote out loud also, because I find that this is very representative of how the participants would describe the emotional experience with loneliness. "I visualized myself as a box with no one by my side. It was dark, isolated, alienated. The box was not seen, not heard, And I constantly thought of this image while doing my personal project. I tried hard, but there were no significant outcomes. No one could validate me as there were no outcome that people could see. So I felt like I had sunk deep into this. I sunk into the deep sea. I visualized myself throwing out a lot and screaming, but no one responded. No one saw me or heard me. No one saw me while there were many people right there. So I just feel isolated and alienated. So most of the participants reported the same feelings where they felt unseen, unheard, and unknown also. And it made them feel like that is the emotional experience of them with loneliness. That is the primary findings that I want to highlight in today's presentation. And I also want to link my findings of loneliness with the overall well-being, physical and mental well-being, as I can find from the literature reviews also. So firstly, loneliness is an emotional draining experience that prevents people from expressing and deriving pleasure from positive emotion compared to their non-lonely counterparts. So it basically means that when participants feel lonely, they would lack the energy to also like resolve their lonely states. So that is why like sometimes feeling lonely is really like endures, and then it lasts for quite a while, and participants just do not have the enough energy to really like go out there and experience and like get connected with other people again or get connected to themselves again. So it really wasn't their loneliness. And also Ypsilanti in 2018 also found that lonelier people are more subject to self-disgust than non-lonely people. Hence, they are more likely to develop depression and anxiety. And this links to the part where participants would have a distorted sense of self, and loneliness is caused when they feel disconnected with themselves and the surrounding. And also, many previous research also find that higher level of loneliness are associated with depressive symptoms, and chronic loneliness has a reciprocal relationship with depressions, meaning that loneliness may intensify depressive symptoms and vice versa. So that is all I want to present in my finding and discussion part. And also for about this research implication, I find that my research is one of the first to really consider in Vietnam to really consider loneliness from the qualitative perspective, and using so that I can really shed light on how young adults in Vietnam experience loneliness rather than using a predefined conceptualization of loneliness in order to study its association with other like mental conditions and the like. However, there are many limitations in the current research. The first is I use convenient sampling. So it's quite limiting in terms of access to young adults from multiple backgrounds and personal traits. All of my participants attend university in Ho Chi Minh City, and none of them reported having any like mental difficulties or mental disorders at the time of the interview. Also, the realist philosophical basis, I did not like study the experience within the wider social cultural context, and I do not like explicitly making the link between their experience and what is happening within the wider social cultural context in Ho Chi Minh City and in Vietnam. And that also it is also a suggestion for the future research into loneliness in Vietnam to see how the social cultural context here makes the experience like unique and like different from like the experience among young adults in other nations. And also the studies is of small scope, and really like having to interviews with participants, and also by equipping myself with the researching skill needed to talk to them and refining my research along the way, like took quite a lot of time, and I can only manage to interview 8 participants, and 8 is enough for undergraduate projects as suggested by Brown and Clark in their studies. But yeah, it is still a small scope, and also I have to cut out some of the themes in my research due to limited like space, because for example, there's a theme that I was also very intrigued by, like the experience of loneliness within workplace, but then I could not really include it in my research due to limited space. So that is the end of my presentation. So this is the references if you want to read more about loneliness. And thank you for joining me. And I'm excited about your questions, and please give me your feedback if there's any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was another really interesting presentation. And I really like how you actually sort of interrogated the conception of loneliness itself in the Vietnamese context, using that qualitative approach, which, as you pointed out, is new, since the other studies have been more quantitative in nature on that subject. And I think my main feedback, but we could talk more about it later, would just be to try to expand your sample size in the future so that you can make your results sort of even stronger. But otherwise, I thought it was a really, really interesting study. So now we're going to move on to our final presentation for today, which will be a team presentation from Son Sokontia and Ek Krishna. Sokontia is a psychology student at the Royal University of Phnom Penh in Cambodia, who is interested in industrial organizational psychology. And Krishna is also a psychology student at RUPP, interested in educational psychology, and he plans to work for an NGO after graduation. They will be presenting about perceptions of work-life balance and self-care among Cambodian undergraduate students. And I also just wanted to point out, even though we're waiting till the end to take questions, people can start putting their questions in the chat now if they want to, just as they occur to them. So, so they don't forget about them. Okay, so Sokontia and Krishna, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Elena, and thank you everyone for the participants. And my friend will share the slide and I will be the presenter.
So can you see the slide, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, good evening, everyone. And my name is Krishna. I'm a year 4 in psychology. My English is not good, so my apologize. I will graduate in July, and unfortunately, our graduation will not have the opportunity to depending the DC. So we decide to lead a small project to present in a symposium symposium conference.
So this is our small finding that we are going to present you, since we didn't have the thesis to define for our graduated. Krishna, can you share the present with the big one?
Yeah. So let up my English is not well. So this is the content of our small project. So let's start from me about the introduction of the small project that we we will going to talk about the work-life balance of among the undergraduate Cambodian. Work-life balance is seems like a crucial for everyone, but it is especially for a college student that we need to look after and take care of it. In the term of university life, the student face with academic difficulty and financial constraint and cultural expectation can all contribute to stress and burnout that lead to another symptom of mental health. So we use the qualitative study to focus on the Cambodian undergraduate student perception of work-life balance and their self-care, and especially for their coping style with their stress and challenge. Oh, my sorry about the screen.
You can put the finger.
So the methodology will might go through the second here.
So I'm going to introduce the methodology that we do for our qualitative study. First, our sampling. We were asking and inviting for volunteering for the third year and fourth year university student who join our focus group discussion. And our sampling was employed based on the selection criteria of the study. And our methodology of data collection and pro schedule we conduct for 4 sessions of semi-structured interview using a focus group format. And our semi-structured interview, we got 9 questions, and the participant was informed about the study purpose, provide consent, and sign for the information consent for the interview. Can move on. Okay, for our finding, first I'm going to talk about the characteristic of the participant. For the location, 9 participants of 42.86% originally from Phnom Penh and 57.14% originally from the province, and they all come to study at the different university in Cambodia. And the 8 participants, between like 20 to 25 years old, volunteering in this study. The gender is like 28.57% male and 71.43% are female. And occupation during their study is like specialist educator, volunteering, project assistant, center coordinator, like they're working in the NGO or private sector, data collector, the designer, intern at the hospital, customer service, and construction worker. And most of the students, they are like working part-time in the morning shift or afternoon shift, and then they study for the half day. Let's move to our key findings. So we have 4 key findings. The first one is the challenge. Mostly the student, like they have the conflict between working hour and class commitment. Normally they didn't have much time to attend the class, as some students mentioned that they have missed the class or missed like for 30 minutes because like they are busy at the work. They also face a financial challenge because like they have to pay for the class material, healthcare, transportation, meal, accommodation that they need to pay in Phnom Penh. And the other challenge is like they have the different job and the different study. It's mean like they study for this major, but actually they're doing not the same as their major. And the last of the challenge is mostly they mentioned that they stress and burn out that they lead to the mental health, and it can be like anxiety, they can have like sleep disorder, and they can have like eating disorder. Kisna, can you move to the next slide? So the second theme of our finding is work-life balance. So participants struggle to balance their work and study with many feeling like stressed, exhausted, and they also mention about the importance of taking a break and engaging in self-care activity to maintain our health balance. They have mentioned that they're taking a rest and traveling and besides study and working. This is their they consider their work-life balance. Next slide. And the third finding theme is about the self-care. So participant emphasizes the importance of the self-care, including getting enough sleep, eating healthy, and engaging in activity that they enjoy. They also mention the importance for seeking support from friends and family and taking break when they need it. More than this, they also find meditation is helpful with reducing stress.
Yes, start with me again. It seems like our research is a lack of literature review. So later on, after the symposium conference, we might go through with more literature to add on to weighing on our small project. This is the finding of the possession of the student about the ideal university in their dream and student of the defined definition of good student. The participant or the student had various idea of what an ideal university would they look like and they want to be and they want to study in. They mostly mention about the environment and space. They prefer green space, connection with the nature and clean environment, especially toilet and relaxation space, comfortable classes, and adequate motorbike parking lot with security. And the second point is about the concern and they desire about teaching style and learning. They prefer more professional teacher and the teacher is still ongoing with update knowledge, with update new theory and new document. They would like more practical and hand-on learning in class and practical favor. They want a teacher. They want a teacher is a good one with sharing and lecturing style, and they want a teacher and in teaching and learning process. They prefer more attention and fieldwork to credit their qualification. And about the library resource, they prefer more nation language and foreign language with many choice to choose. And about the last one is practical facility, and especially they want the computer lab and other experimental maturity. So the third one, the first is the student. The idea of the student, they prefer about the student support and service. they want the university is partnership with other stakeholder for another opportunity for volunteer and internship. They prefer study club, music, sport, and project implementation, technology training, and other workshop to build up more capacity and gain more knowledge. They also mentioned about school counselor or career counselor to talk with them about future job and which major would be fitable for their characteristic. And another one is called administrative service and financial flexibility and understanding of student condition, because most of students they come from province and the economic family is really it's in a not good one system, and they want the credit opportunity for potential student to recognize. And the other consideration, consideration, they require the university rank more competitive, even to challenge about the in different criteria measure or other competition to build up more knowledge and engage with more stakeholder and with cultural with cross-cultural also. So in the finding by film, the final finding is about the definition of goal student in their perception. They the participant they respond how to define the being of goal student based on their shared characteristic as a fellow a goal student is being on time and respect, listening and discipline, knowledge and sharing, moral and proactive in class. And this is what I reflect the value and behavior contribute to being a good student, such as punctuality, respect for rule, and other active learning, discipline, and knowledge and sharing with and moral character. So yes, Kunti might go through with that more.
So here is the conclusion and implication. So the study contribute to the existing literature and offer value insight for policymaker and intervention to ensure work-life balance and self-care among Cambodian undergraduate students. So, and here we would like to have a balancing between the work and the school. So the students have the commitment and it less stress and burnout. And then while they are studying and working, they can have like their work-life balance, and also they can have less stress during working and studying, and it less negative impacts on their mental health. One more thing, their perception of the university image and student identity provide an insight into their study related to challenge and preferred solution. Next slide.
Yes, is that it? Oh, one more.
One more. Next slide.
Acknowledgement.
So for our acknowledgement, we would like to thank the participant for this study and our mentorship, Dr. Retirom and symposium organizer and the audience. And one more thing, it's kind of the small research and small finding that we are young to do it. We are more than welcome to receive any comment for the better for the better doing. And any question, feel free to ask. And we are mentioned. We are more than welcome to receive all the comment, and then we would like to make it better than this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting to learn more about the perceptions and the lives of Cambodian undergraduate students who are experiencing a number of different stresses right now and navigating a number of different sort of experiences. So we have a few minutes left for questions. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, or just, you can also just start talking, just unmute yourself and start talking. We have one question already in the chat, which is from Ho Hang. I don't know, would this person like to, do you want to ask your question or should I just read it?
Yeah, you can help me read it.
Okay, sure, I'll read it then.
Thank you.
So she wanted to know, and this is for Dan Quang, is there any survey to measure the portion of young Vietnamese adults experiencing loneliness, to your knowledge? And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for the question. Like in my literature review, I like the body of literature review on loneliness in Vietnam do not really focus on young adults. So there's not so many papers regarding like young adults in experiencing loneliness. So there's only a statistical report that I can find reporting that among like 465 participants in Hanoi in a study about loneliness in 2018, like more than 80% of them reported like experiencing signs of loneliness according to the UCLA loneliness scale. So it's not like and yeah, it's not a very like well like established numbers, but then I hope that it gives you an insight into the measure portion. And yeah, loneliness is often studied among like the late adult within like late adulthood like life stage rather than young adulthood one. So that is also a reason why I want to conduct this study focusing on young adulthood life stage. Yeah, so thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had seen Andrew's hand was raised. I don't know if you still have a question.
Yes. So I have a short question to Mr. Dan. So, I just want to ask, so how to control our overthinking in this situation in Myanmar? So some of the cut internet down in some of place in Myanmar. So how to control our overthinking?
So how to in the Burmese context, you were asking how to to control overthinking?
Yes.
Dan Quang, do you feel comfortable answering that question? Or maybe you could talk a little bit about the idea of loneliness and connectivity versus depression and other kinds of anxiety?
So sorry, but I still cannot get like the answer. The question. Can you please repeat it?
Andrew, yes, could you try again, please?
Yes, so I mean, the most some of the people's over depressions in Myanmar. So how to control our mind?
Mhm. That is a very big question. I think
It is, yeah.
yeah, I cannot like speak for other contexts other than Vietnam's and in which my participants come from. So I think that some of the ways that my participants report like to really like not controlling but rather coping with loneliness include like two key ideas. The first is they compromise with whatever like lies under their control. For example, when the disconnectedness come from the failure of others to fulfill their expectations, they would like try to compromise with their own expectations of what others have to do. So for example, like when one of my participants feel disconnectedness because she wants to like be with her close friend during her moments of like hardships or difficulties, for example. But then her friends are not available, and she equates that unavailability with like their rejection of her or her being the burden to them. However, like she also reported like gradually like trying to make peace with her friends' unavailability, and then try to compromise with her expectation of them, and try to realize the automatic assumption that she's putting up on her friends. And she also and that is how like she compromised with her own expectations of others in order to mitigate her loneliness experience. Or also like other participants also report like using reflection and contemplation, like after they experience what they called loneliness, they would like spend some time rethinking like what happened to them, where is like the causes of loneliness, and what they could have done in that situation so that they can make meanings with their experience of loneliness, or they can have like more lessons learned for future encounters with loneliness. And yeah, I cannot like really speak for people from other like backgrounds. So, but that is what I find from participants here in Vietnam, young adults. So I hope my answers helps. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, I also had a question for Dan Tom. As I said, I was really interested in your presentation on gender roles in the workplace, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of the sort of teachings of Confucianism and sort of traditional ideas that people have about gender roles in Vietnam, and then also how that might oftentimes affect what kinds of work women do, because I know you were looking at STEM specifically. But if that, I would assume that's not a traditional field for women to go into, and that there are other fields that would be considered more like feminine fields. And then within the STEM workplace, also, if there are certain kinds of roles or duties that sort of get foisted onto women or pushed onto women because of expectations of women, what women should do or be capable of doing.
Yes, thank you for your questions. So as I mentioned in the presentation, that Vietnamese society and culture are heavily influenced by the Confucianism teaching principles. So there are some principles that really shape and affect gender relations in Vietnam. The first one is the three obedience, meaning that women have to obey and respect their father, husband, and son. And another principle is about four virtues, meaning that women have to conform to the high standards, the virtue, and keeping their appearance in work, in how they speak, how they behave. And I, through the research that I read for my thesis, these principles have shaped and have shaped the women into the more traditional and feminine role, and also make women internalize the belief and make them lead them to normalize the gender relation, their inferior roles in the society. And I think in the Vietnam context, as well in other countries, STEM is unconventional field for women to participate in. In Vietnam, women account for only 37% in STEM workforce. And I think my participants share a lot of things in the survey, that there are sexist bias in the hiring process, and also, as I shared before, in daily conversations. And to speak more about the context, actually, my research also asked some questions, asked participants to share more about their experiences, and they share that in their organization, they often encounter the sexism from the coworker, managers, and client customers, and the context they experienced the sexism was mostly in casual conversation, which with 84% of people indicated that sexism occur in casual conversation. 40% indicated sexism happened in the meetings, and also 26% told that sexism occur in internal events. And I think and another point that they mentioned, which I think is very interesting to mention, is about the drinking party in Vietnam. So one participant shared that they were forced to entertain the guests and join the drinking party, and drinking is a very gender practice in Vietnam. It is often considered as a male practice to network, to build a relationship, and it is quite inappropriate for women to drink a lot. And other research also show that it's a dilemma for working women to join or not to join the drinking party, because if they join, it's kind of inappropriate out of character. But if they do not join, they miss the opportunity to network, to bond with the people in the companies. So I hope that I answered your question.
Yes, yeah, that's really interesting. And I can definitely understand your point about the drinking party as well. I don't know, I would say from my experiences, like working in Cambodia, that usually, yes, a drinking party would be considered more of a male event, and that also women are usually expected to be home earlier in the night, you know, to deal with family issues and to prepare dinner and stuff like that. And they wouldn't, you know, be available for a drinking party, nor would it be considered sort of acceptable for women to drink large amounts of alcohol in the same way. Yeah. So thank you for that. And then I did, I was also just curious, I had a couple questions for Sukantia and Krishna. One thing I was wondering, I've heard a lot of talk about self-care recently in the Cambodian context, especially in sort of different NGOs having trainings about self-care. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how Cambodian students perceive or define self-care, what kind of activities they engage in. And then the other question I had was, I believe you mentioned that eating disorders were also an issue. And I was curious what kinds of eating disorders students are exhibiting, because that's just not something I have any familiarity with. I haven't heard about in the Cambodian context.
Thank you so much for the question. First, I would like to answer the first question for the Cambodian context. Cambodian student at university or undergraduate student, they define self-care as their safe activity, like they doing like something that is like the same as their habit, like for example enjoy listen to music or traveling. They also define like talking to their friend after class is also defined as self-care, as they mentioned during the interview. And one more thing, maybe I confuse between eating disorder and eating habit, because normally they mention as eating habit, not eating disorder. So normally in here we have lunch around like 12 o'clock, but actually for the schedule at university we have from 12 or 12:30. So it's kind of challenge for them to have like lunch earlier, because like some of the students, they finish class, they finish like work around 12 and they didn't got enough time to have lunch. Sometimes they skip lunch until the class finish. So their habit of eating is like kind of changing.
Mhm. Oh, I see. Okay, so eating habits, it affected their eating habits.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I don't think that we have any time for any more questions right now, because we've come upon the end of the period here. But I'm so glad that we had these great presentations from all of our student presenters. And I also hope that you all stay in touch with each other and with us as well. And I will be posting this recording online as well. So anyone who wasn't able to make it will be able to see it. And I hope that we can continue the conversations. So thank you very much. And everyone, please give them a round of applause.